Hey Team Electronics and Coding, this screencast is a brief introduction to, how to best navigate to TinkerCAD and then how to use it when you're in there. So at the top of our Schoology page, there is a handy dandy TinkerCAD login link. This will take you right to our class page. So click on this. It's going to tell you that the link is broken, but if you click on the jump out little box, you should get there. You're going to join with your nickname. Your nickname should be your first name and then the first letter of your last name. So I'm Casey K. That's me. And voila. Now I am in our class TinkerCAD. Over here, if you click on the class page, you'll see our class here, and you'll see the activity that you will do in class, but you probably by the time you're watching this, you will have already done. So all the activities that we do in class are going to be located in this little section of TinkerCAD, and if you go here, you can create your own designs. You can create 3D designs. We're not going to be doing that in class. We are going to be designing and building circuits. So it's going to give you some sort of random funny title, and you can change this if you want. So maybe this will be class demo. When you're designing something in TinkerCAD, you usually want to start with pulling out the components that you're going to be using and putting them in the space. For us, we are going to be just setting up a really simple circuit with a resistor. Let's say this is 220, and we'll change it to ohms. And actually, I'm gonna put the resistor here, an LED, and a button. And then I'm gonna throw on some wires. Let's actually make this wire red, and we will connect red to 5 volts here, and then we'll connect our power bus. Oh, whoops, no, stay red. And then ground to the ground bus here, and then circuit to ground. Okay, so you played around in class setting up some simple circuits, and tomorrow you are going to experiment with buttons. So over here are all the components. Right now it's set to basic, but you can also change it and say, I want to see all the components. You can search for components, so maybe you want the DC motor, and here it is. So this is pretty useful search feature. Something that we haven't played around with yet, but we will start in 2 days is we're not only are we electronics, but we're also coding. So here are the electronics components, but and in this view you can see all of the different electronics components, but if you press on this button right here, you can toggle the code editor. It's gonna start you in blocks, but we're actually going to be coding with text. So you can switch that to text and then just delete the code that's already here. And I'm going to take a few notes. So this is the basic. We're going to be coding in C++, and whenever you code, you're always going to start out with 2 functions, the setup and the loop. The setup is a piece of code that runs once at the beginning of the program. So if you do 2 slashes here, this allows you to make a comment in your code, and the computer won't read it as part of the code. So 2 slashes, and then I'm going to want you to annotate your code and say runs once at the start of the program. The loop is a piece of the code that is going to run continuously over and over and over again in a loop until you stop the program from running. So, after the setup. So the setup is going to run once all the way through, and then the loop is going to run once, and then twice, and then 3 times, and then 4 times, and so on and so forth. So, oops, runs on a loop after the setup. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to have, so when we program, we're going to be writing pieces of code in between the curly braces in the setup and also in between the curly braces in the code, or in the loop. More on that to come. Whenever we are programming something, we are going to be programming 2 different types of components. We're going to be programming sensors, and we're going to be programming actuators. Sensors are components that take a physical input and they give an electrical output. And actuators do the opposite. They take an electrical input and give a physical output. So what does that even mean? If I start the simulation, you will notice that the light is off. But if I push my button, the light turns on. This button is a sensor. It takes a physical input, which is the press of the finger, and it gives an electrical, oh, I spelled this wrong, E-L-E-C, stop simulation, output. The output that it gives is the electrical connection. I'm not going to get into the details because you're going to explore that tomorrow, but the physical input is the press, and the electrical output is allowing the current to flow. The actuator is our LED. It takes an electrical input, so it has a current flowing through it. That's the electrical input, and it gives us the physical output, which is the glow of the light. So we are going to, just broadly speaking, code a whole different variety of sensors and actuators. And whenever we are working with sensors, we are going to read them because we are reading the physical input, and then we are going to give an electrical output. And whenever we communicate to actuators, or with actuators, we are going to write to them. So sensors we read, actuators we write to. Okay, so that is the coding portion of TinkerCAD, or the code view. You can drop back out the code, and then you can add more components to your working board. I think the last thing I want to tell you, up in this upper right-hand corner, you can see the circuits view, which gives us the view of all of the components as we would see them in real life. But you can also toggle the view, and you can change it to the schematic view. So if you zoom in here, you can see that we've got our Arduino right here. We've connected it to 5 volts right here. And so this is the high side of our circuit. Here, this is showing you 2 lines here because the push button actually has 2, it's not ports, but 2, what's the word? Pins that you can connect to. More on that tomorrow. Don't worry about that for right now, but you can just imagine this is a single line here. And then this kind of cantilever bridge style depiction is showing you that this is a switch. So it is open when the button is unpressed, but it switches down into fixed bridge position and completes the circuit when the button is pressed. Okay, and then we zoom over here till we get to our LED. It's telling us it's a red one. And then here is our resistor and the value in ohms of that resistor. And then we scoop here back to ground. So this is a very similar circuit diagram to the one that we drew for our screencast 2 nights ago. So you're mostly going to be using this view, but the schematic view can be useful as well. And then last view is just a list of all the components that you have in the field of play. So again, we're mostly going to be using the circuit view, but the schematic and the components list is also there. They can be useful. Okie dokie. I think that's all for tonight's screencast. Take a screenshot of this or not of this, of mine, but of yours, and upload it to Schoology.